right, so let's keep building. Man, we've accomplished so much so far. We've learned about routes and how we handle them. We've learned about how we handle requests in Express. Now let's take a look at how we actually build responses. Well, why might we want to build a response? Well, our whole goal is to send some response back to the client. And a response object, that second argument passed to our callback function, is what's going to give us the ability to build and send a proper HTTP response back to our clients. All right, that is what we are here for. Okay, so let's take a look at the response object and what it has for us in order to send data back to our clients. All right, so the first thing we need to talk about is the header, right? So the one of the most important parts of creating an HTTP response is to set the headers on the response. All right, so for instance, we want to set the content type in order to tell the browser how to handle the responses. All right, so we had a couple helper methods such as get and set that allow us to get, retrieve, and set the header values that are sent with our HTTP response. All right. So the most common methods that you're going to use are the header or get, and we pass the get function the header, and set, which we pass the header and the value. All right. So these two methods allow us to get and set any header value. All right. So example, if we want to set the content type header, right, we get content type, which would show us the old type, right, and then we say res.set content type, comma, and then we do something like text plain to set it to text plain. And we'll look at that in just a second. All right. Let's talk about the additional helper methods that are available to us. So we've of course talked about get, which returns the value of the header parameter. We've talked about set, which allows us to set the values of the header parameter. All right. Location, if we pass the location method a path, all right, which can be a URL, something such as /login or http://server.net. We can use a relative path, or we can use a browser action such as back. It's going to set the location header to the path parameter specified. All right. We can also use type to set our content type value specifically. And attachment allows us to attach files to send to the browser. All right. We also sometimes need to set the HTTP status for a response. So remember our status codes, such as 200, which is okay, or 404, right? All right, so we can use the status method to set the status. All right, and we're going to look at all these again. You can see them in the code as you see them, but we're going to look at that shortly. All right, so for instance, status 200 is okay. Status 300 is a redirection. Status 400 is a bad request. Status 401 is unauthorized. Status 403 is forbidden. And status 500 is a server error. All right. So when we are ready to send our response, as you've already seen, we just use the send method to send our response back to the server. All right. So the send method can use one of the following formats, right? It can either be uh, an HTTP status code and body, all right, and it can either be a string or a buffer object, all right. So we can pass back the status and a body string, or just a body string, and that body can either be a string or a buffer object. All right. All right. So let's take a look at this code to look at the basics real quick. All right. So again, creating our importing the Express module. All right. Here we're finally using the URL module here. All right. Create an instance of Express, and we're going to listen on port 80. All right. Now, here's our first route, first of two. All right, this is a get, and it maps to the root. All right, takes in a request and the response object in our callback. Here we build a string containing the HTML response. All right, simple HTML just contains the HTML tag, head tag, title tag, simple send, body with the H1, hello from Express, closing H1, and the closing body tag. All right, we're going to set the request status to 200 because we found the file and it's okay. All right, now let's set the content type. Here we're using our set. It takes an object here. All right, we're setting the content type to text/HTML, which tells the browser it's an HTML page, and to render it as such. And we're sending the content length, which is the length of our string. All right, and then we're ready to send it back. So we just send it back here by passing a response to send, and just a couple console.logs to display some of the information. All right. Here's the get that responds to /error. So if we have an error or a request for an error, all right, we're going to return status 404, and we're going to send back that that's a bad request. All right, so let's see it in action. All right, so let's just go to our localhost root. And there's our HTML page, hello from Express. All right, notice the difference now. We didn't send, this is an HTML page. We didn't just send a string back to the browser. We actually rendered HTML because you can tell that this is an H1 tag. So if you view source, you should see the HTML that we built in our string back in our code. All right, take care.